Welcome, everybody, to the newest edition of AASCENDTV, Life on the Autism Spectrum. I am your co-host, Jennifer Brooks.
And I'm your co-host, Will Burnick.
So, before we get started with today's guest, Will, tell us about your shirt.
Gladly. For this episode, I'm wearing my USF shirt. Today is one of our USF's one of their basketball games. Their basketball season is ending shortly. So I encourage everyone to take one more chance to go see one of their games. However, next baseball season they're starting their baseball season next month. So I hope everyone's ready to go see the Dons play baseball again, just like last year.
Today, I am wearing a strawberry shortcake t-shirt because we are filming this on Valentine's Day. And now I would like to introduce today's guest. Laney Hills is the founder of CuriouslyDivergent and NeuroCuriosity and an autistic advocate who knows firsthand what it means to work in systems that weren't built for us. Yes, I know the feeling too. After spending years masking, navigating corporate power dynamics, and experiencing workplace discrimination, Laney began translating those experiences into education and change. Today, she works with leaders, HR professionals, and teams to redesign workplace systems so neurodivergent people don't have to choose between authenticity and survival. Her work centers on clarity, dignity, and building environments where people are no longer asked to be entirely too much. Will, would you like to ask Laney the first question?
Tell us about how you became involved in the autism community.
I would love to. I will say that I got here by accident. I knew I was autistic from the time I was 3. I taught myself to read at 2, and my mom took me in to get me tested, and that's when I found out I was autistic. I hid that fact, like Jennifer said, for a very long time. When I first disclosed, it was because I was at work and I legitimately needed an accommodation. It was still when we were in the office, and when you're in an open office plan and there's all that noise around you, and it becomes a physical pressure on me, and I couldn't tolerate it. And so I knew for the first time I was going to need to kind of come out with this and to see how it went. And the first time I came out with it, it was great. And it wasn't until I really went through this last issue at work where I couldn't survive without these accommodations. And after going through, I'd been with the company over a decade. And in 11 months, I went from being very highly reviewed to getting fired. And it was that process, as devastating and as hurtful as it was, that as I was trying to save my job and researching like how to teach him what I was, how I communicate, it was in that I actually found this amazing community and connected in a way I never had before. And as I started talking and talking and talking online, my voice got clearer and clearer, and found out people wanted to listen to what I had to say. So that's kind of how I got involved in the community. I didn't do it on purpose. I was trying to save my job.
Tell us about your current projects of CuriouslyDivergent and NeuroCuriosity.
So I am hyperverbal. I always have been hyperverbal. I took the SATs in 6th grade, hyperverbal. And I love to write. I think writing and words are one of the few pieces of true magic in the world. And I say that because it's the only thing I know of that I don't even need to be alive in order to make somebody feel something that I will never meet. And I think that is a beautiful thing. I can put into words something that is to me the most human of experiences ever. So I love words and I love to write and I love to express myself through a written word. I started getting asked, hey, have you written a book? And hey, do you come into offices to teach this? And yes, I do. And I needed to put together something more formal. So I started writing corporate training, and I started with what would I like to have had? What options would I like to have seen? And then I brought in some people who know me and who I trust their opinion, and I had them read it, and I got their opinions, and I've talked to hundreds of us. So that's the primary, I guess, big project that Curiously Divergent is working on, and going to be, well, it's out through NeuroCuriosity, which is the educational side of things. And then the other big thing I'm working on is another project that's a collab, and it is targeted specifically at an app based that is designed to help us communicate what we need at work, help us know when to communicate that. And it's done with AI. So it's going to help us communicate it in a way that's understood and not misunderstood, or especially with intent, to our employers or relationships or any conflict situation that we're in. It's going to have help there.
Tell us about redesigning workforce systems and some of your success projects.
So I always think it's fun when I go in to talk to employers. One of the biggest challenges that I give to any employer when I'm talking to them, it is the idea lateral movement. The reason I want to get this lateral movement idea more ingrained in companies across the board is because if you request an accommodation at work, EEOC, which is in the US, it's our government regulation that regulates what our rights are at work. Once you've requested accommodation, you cannot be terminated or you're put into another position that you qualify for in the same company. And they must do that. Now, ask me how many do that. They don't. And it's because for some reason, corporations are not comfortable with this idea of lateral movement. And so the very first thing I challenge them on is the idea of lateral movement. And if they can do that with all of their employees, then it's not so strange to get the idea of lateral movement in for us. And I think that that makes a ton of difference because nearly every case, if we're able to change our leadership, we prevent our terminations.
Interesting.
So that's probably the biggest success story.
So the most burning question I have is you must run into some resistance on the part of employers. Like, it's too expensive, or we've always done it this way and it's always worked just fine, or why should everyone else have to change just because one person has a problem? Okay, so how do you deal with that?
Well, another favorite one I have is if we did that for them, we would have to do it for everybody. And
everybody is not autistic.
Right. And the first thing that I challenge some of that with
Hmm.
is if I was an employee who broke my leg, would I be able to use the elevator? Would you let me use the elevator? And of course, your answer is always yes, because for some reason, it's so much easier for neurotypical people to understand a physical limitation requiring accommodation than it is for something that they're not able to visually observe. And I challenge them regularly with, well, it's invisible. I can't see it. Well, you see my autism all the time. But to speak to those accommodation, I guess, hurdles that they have to get over, one accommodation does not have to be expensive. The burden that they have to be able to prove, let's say in front of a jury, would be that the accommodation would be unreasonable for me to ask of them. So it might be unreasonable for me to ask them to build me my own separate pod outside. That is an unreasonable request. It would be unreasonable for me to say, hey, I need you to change the governmental system of the United States. That's unreasonable. But to say, hey, can I get a scheduling app? Can I get written instructions? That's not unreasonable. And they always have to balance it out with, if this goes to court, am I going to look like I'm being unreasonable? And that's really the burden that they need to get to legally. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does, but everyone has a different idea of what's reasonable and what's unreasonable. And
You're
the
correct.
employee's idea of reasonable could be wildly different from the employer's. So let's just say there's a situation where there's a government agency that has two paralegals, and one of the paralegals is autistic, and the agency forces both of the paralegals to interview clients, which is very difficult for the autistic one. And the other one says she's willing to take on the interviewing, all of it, so that the autistic paralegal can focus on the things that she's actually good at. And the government basically says, because we just won't.
Right. And that is a really good example of, I mean, blatant discrimination that happens all the time. The number of neurodivergent people that are going to encounter some kind of abuse at work that's going to raise to the level of actual discrimination at some point in their career is staggering. It is 89%. There is no excuse for a number that high because it has to be systematic. But in that case, that example that you gave me, my education is in psychology. So when you're dealing with psychology-based scenarios, you got to understand both people's motivation, right? So you have to get to what is your hesitation as the manager. And that is really what I would need to target there and find out what is the question that you have. Is it because you don't want the perception that it's unfair? Like, is that really what the problem is? Or do you perceive that that employee who won't do the interviewing doesn't want to do work or thinks that they just don't like it? And there's a huge difference between I don't like something and like I can't do that. I had a experience when I was a kid. They forced me to eat sweet potatoes. I hate sweet potatoes. Like it is a visceral reaction to them. And it was a clean your plate mom. And I was getting in trouble for not eating these potatoes. So I crammed them down and I got sick and I felt bad. And her mom reacted like I was doing this at her. And I think that that was one of my really first experiences with feeling like me setting a boundary wasn't okay, like it wasn't allowed. And we have to get to the point where when I would talk to the manager, I would really say, okay, what's your hesitation? And then speak to her. And maybe her hesitation was, well, I think that interviewing is kind of complex and you have to do a lot. Okay, well, what if I did all the transcription from the interviewing? What if my partner recorded it and I did the transcription from it? There are things that you can do to balance out the workload that cost the business nothing. And all you had to do was, download a voice recorder on your phone. That's all that would be required and it costs nothing. So when you speak to Turtle is, and a lot of times you need a neutral party to do that, quite honestly. And I would love to tell you it's different, but that is the reality. I know I was talking about this before the show too, that it requires a mediator of some kind because a lot of times people get locked in. And as far as process goes, the challenge that I have for process, it's this. The world is changing very quickly. AI. AI is changing how people get jobs and who is even seen in getting an environment that's changing really quickly.
Laney, we're losing you.
Nothing is going to be usual.
The employer said paralegals must interview. That's what the bureaucracy requires. And if one person has a problem with that, she needs to find a new job.
Sure, but would you have been able to maybe not everybody even can come in for a live interview. So would you have been able to do that, like getting an email form together for them and maybe setting up a chat dialogue in Teams or something like that? Are there any other options that you had
No,
that
there are no other options. The interviews take place in a special room in the courthouse. And if she can't do it, she needs to find a new job. Because that's the way the bureaucracy works.
were there ever exceptions to that ever anywhere for anyone? Ever?
Never. Not that I'm aware of, but I only worked there for 22 months. All right, and now I'd like to introduce our cultural correspondent, Stacey Kennedy. Stacey, do you have a question for Laney?
Yes, thank you, Jennifer. Hi, Laney. I wanted to know what your thoughts were on dialects and what are the problems and solutions for them.
So when you're speaking of dialects, are you speaking of the article I just released?
Well, I read something, unless if I read it wrong or looked at a wrong profile. When something means everything, it means nothing. Does that ring a
Okay,
bell? Yeah.
it does. It does.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So most of my talking I do on LinkedIn.
Okay.
If you're not aware, that's where my base is. It's a very nerdy, cerebral platform, and I just love it for that.
Yeah,
But I
and that's
just
where I
released
found
an
Laney on
article.
LinkedIn.
I just released an article called Dialects, and it's talking about how the same word can mean different things in different places. And a great example where this came from. I was talking with a lady in Melbourne, and it's the end of summer in Melbourne, and she was talking about her thongs, and she was referring to her sandals, and it was just kind of a funny conversation because it comes across totally different in the United States. So when we're talking dialects, I think that that's a really great concept. And when we have language like neurodiversity and neurodivergent, the benefit of the language is we're included in it, which is great because we need some inclusion. But the downside is that term is so broad that it encompasses every single possible variation that could ever exist within the human brain. Okay, well, when you have a word that essentially means everything, then the everything really means nothing because I can't train to everything. I can't teach you strategies for everything. But there's a kind of a group of us within neurodiversity that, from a biological perspective and from a psychological perspective, we share some very, very similar traits. And how we process information is similar. Well, I can train to that. So the new term that I've kind of been steering on here, variation. I don't do this to exclude anybody. I I say it's called neurointegrative, by the way, and it's based on how we interpret information. We integrate it into ourselves. We can't just take a single piece of information and file it in along with this piece, because when we integrate new information, it becomes attached to every other bit of information we know, and that's just how we learn. So we are the why kids. We will ask 1,000 why questions because we have to deconstruct before we get together. And that's what we're doing when we're asking why. We're pulling it apart and seeing how it works. Once we get it locked in, that's how we communicate everything else. So that's what neurointegrative really means. It's not to exclude anyone and say you're not part of my group. It's really so we have the language to teach and to offer some strategies. So thank you for bringing that up. I love that you read that. Thank you.
Sure, yeah, I think that's the only question I have at the moment. If anyone else wants to, but yes, thank you. That was a great answer.
How do you plan to promote your program and your projects around the Bay Area, outside of the show?
So that the answer to that, I mean, you can find me on LinkedIn, and I offer programs. I can do webcasts. I'll come to the Bay Area if you want me to. I've been to the Bay Area. It's beautiful. Thank you. Stayed in Marin County. It was lovely. And, it is something that I'm willing to do from anywhere, but I think that the internet gives us the ability to make our community connected in a way that we've never really had before. And I think that that has done amazing things. So wherever the internet is, I can be. And as soon as we launch this collaborative app that I'm working on, you will hear a lot from me because I have a lot of the language behind it, where the people that I'm partnering with, they are very much on the technical side of things, and I just do what they tell me, but I can talk about it. So as far as how to get in touch with what I do, message me on LinkedIn and I will be happy to work with you. I have a whole bunch of different programs that I can do. I speak about it. I have been on panels, webinars, podcasts. I'm very vocal. So I at this point I'm still small enough where I can interact with people one on one, and I love to help. So anything that I could do for the community, I find me. It's just LaneyHills on LinkedIn.
Okay, Laney, can you tell us a little bit more about the resources for employees to
Mhm.
know their rights?
So first, above everything else, you must familiarize yourself with eeoc.gov, and it is a bit in legalese. It's kind of tough to read if that's not your education behind it. So absolutely put it into your favorite AI product and have it kind of help translate it for you. But what you need to know is there's some really common stuff that we see. So primarily, if you ask for accommodation at work, you do not need to have it be super formal. You don't need to say, my name is so-and-so and I need ADA accommodation. What you do need to say is, hey, I have a condition. You don't even need to name your condition that requires some accommodation. Can we open up a discussion on that? And that's it. That is notification. And that puts the burden onto the employer to do some things. And as soon as you disclose, at that point, you have some rights that the business has a responsibility to accommodate. So one of the first things that you're going to come up with in a business is they're going to hand you a medical documentation form. So that is the first place that we see a lot of rights get violated. And in that form, there usually is a spot that says diagnosis. That is not legal for them to ask, because if you have your doctor fill that out, you will also need to fill out a release form, and you do not need to fill out a release form for medical accommodation for work. The other thing that it has on most forms is it'll say on there, like it'll have a space for your doctor to fill in what your accommodation should be. And a doctor is not part of that conversation according to the law. So the only thing your doctor needs to put on a little note is your name, has a condition that would benefit from accommodation. This condition is permanent and accommodations may change over time. Period. The end. Submit. There is nothing else that needs to be on that, and that is per the law. That is the first place we see this violated all the time. The next really big thing, if you're put on a performance improvement plan or a PIP, first, something I train to all businesses is neurodivergent employees should never be put on PIPs. They are ineffective. They generally make the situation worse, and very few of us ever survive them. So, at a PIP as an employee, one of the things to look for on there is, does it block your movement within the company? That is a huge deal because EEOC requirements say that if an employee is unable to perform core job duties, and those core job duties, by the way, are what are described in either a job description online or in the original description that you applied for. Those are your core job duties. Anything else outside that, they have a really tough time proving that those are your core job duties. So if you're unable to perform your core job duties, either with or without accommodation, they are required to move you into another position within the organization that you qualify for. That is black and white, period. So if there's language in there telling you you can't apply for those positions or you don't qualify for movement, that's against EEOC language. Another one is that if it in any way hinders your ability to get raises, bonuses, or other benefits of your job, those are also illegal. So they have to provide the accommodation. The accommodation conversation, you do not need to accept an accommodation that does not address your need. So if I'm ADHD, so as severely ADHD as well, um, I need something that helps me figure out what is the most important task of the day, because otherwise I will get frozen trying to figure that out. And I need one that's designed for ADHD. Are there cheaper ones out there? Sure. Do they do what I need them to? No. So the requirement and the burden on the business is it has to provide support for what their employee needs. So those are the big ones and ones that I see violated all the time. So whether you're a business or an employee on this, check your paperwork for them, because in everything that I gave you, those are all documents that are prepared by the employer that the employee can take to a court and present in front of a jury and say, this is against the law, and it's in black and white.
Can you tell us about Curiously Divergent and NeuroCuriosity Divergent clients or programs?
So neuro curiously divergent, that really was born out of that place of hurt. And I remember when I was a kid, I watched Rudolph, and remember the Island of Misfit Toys. I was like ugly crying because I needed that place to be real so bad. And that's what Curiously Divergent really, it started as this ache. And the idea of it be this dream, and it is building. And what I would love to see is a movement that really inspires us to a place of belonging where we can create together and work together and learn together and have community together and do life together in a way that we've always kind of been outside the circle on. And that is my heart. And that's what Curiously Divergent is. Coming out from that is NeuroCuriosity. And that is specifically phrased in a way that is approachable and not, it doesn't feel like preachy to the people who would be involved in it. And that is all about outreach and try to make meaningful change to a world that is not made for us. And I'm not trying to present it to them in a way that's shaming them. I'm presenting it to them in a way that they can relate to. I've always been great with metaphors, and that is, if you read any of my stuff, I'd use them all the time. And it's something that really translates it naturally to be approachable to anybody. So, and I do like to do this. I can talk to executives, I can talk to the frontline people, and I've been told that that's fairly unique. So as far as getting a hold of me, again, you can reach me on LinkedIn. You can also drop me an email. It is just laney.curiouslydivergent@gmail. And I'm real good about getting back to you. You can also call me. I am in Nebraska, and you can reach me at 402-739-9776. And that is my business line as well. So, but absolutely, if you're interested in having me come and talk or being on something, just get a hold of me and I'd be happy to. This is a passion of mine and I love sharing and I love talking with us. So if you have other stories for me, things that happened to you at work, please reach out. I want to hear those stories. It's how I really hone my training to be meaningful. And I can say, this is another example. So uh, thank you for sharing. If you've got me and you're in hearing distance of this for including me, I want to thank all of you guys for having me as well. It makes a difference. Every chance, every
You're
I
breaking up
have
again.
makes a difference for this Island of Misfit Toys that I hope to have. I'm so sorry. It makes a difference for this Island of Misfit Toys that I wish.
Well, folks, this concludes another edition of ASCEND TV, Life on the Autism Spectrum. Until next time, I'm your co-host, Jennifer Brooks.
I'm your co-host, Will Burnick.
I'm your cultural correspondent, Stacey Kennedy.
And I am Laney Hills. Thank you so much for having me.